Do you know what? Doing this series of interviews from home has been so refreshing because I get to meet so many fantastic and influential people and people that are literally icons in the world of motoring. And I'm blessed, I get to sit here and I get to tap into their front rooms, their offices, into their lives, and I get to chat and in an informal way and find out about them and find out what drives their passions and find out all about their successes and why we're talking here. Today, I am there is hair genuinely standing up on the back of my neck. I've met Richard a couple of times in the past, but never sat down and done a proper interview with him. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's a bit of a weird one because I so want to call him Sir, because I think we're missing something in this country. When we pin these honours on people, there's a certain honour that should be pinned on this man. He's already an OBE. Please welcome my very special guest. He is, of course, the fastest man in the world and also builds the fastest cars in the world, Richard Noble OBE. Richard, how are you?
Glad to be with you, Mike. Really glad to be with you.
So, Richard, first and foremost, okay, so I did say the hair tingles, and I'm going to say it right off the bat, and I'm not the only one to say it. When I knew you was going to let me do this interview with you, I was thrilled, and I thought, he must be Sir Richard Noble by now. I can't introduce him as Richard Noble OBE. He must be Sir Richard Noble.
No, absolutely not. Delighted that I'm not. No, for God's sake, Mike, that means you've joined the establishment. And if you've joined the establishment, you'll never achieve anything again.
Yeah, but think of the restaurant bookings, Richard. Think of it.
Oh, hell with that.
You get upgraded first class on aeroplanes. You get restaurant bookings. Oh, it'd be amazing. Amazing.
No. I'm very happy where we are. Yeah.
Well, good for you. So I've got a lot to talk to you about. Number one is your book. We're going to talk about it in a minute. And but first of all, I want to really sort of go all the way back to when was the first time for you, because you worked in the aircraft industry. So when was the first time for you went, going fast is fun and I want to go fast for the rest of my life? Was it as a kid going down a hill on a toboggan? Was it on a skateboard? Was it on a push bike? When did it happen?
It happened in 1952. Seems a hell of a long time ago. Yes. And that's when my dad took us for a drive around Loch Ness in Scotland. He was based in the army up there. And we saw John Cobb's jet boat Crusader on Loch Ness. And I saw that thing and I thought, wow, this is for me. The military life my dad had was a bit boring. And I thought, this is much more interesting.
So you were
and I've always enjoyed speed, but I've always enjoyed the challenge of actually getting something like this done.
Yes.
It's beating the system. It's beating the rather appalling British system, the lack of innovation and creativity that we need to do. And I come from this era during the 1950s and the 60s when, Britain was creating the most fantastic products, supersonic airplanes, the Concorde, the E-Type Jaguar, all these sort of things. Things were going really, really well. And since then, it's got a bit quiet.
Yeah, I was just about to say exactly that. You come from an era of time when innovation and British pride was all about putting England out there on a global map and saying, look,
absolutely, yeah.
We're Great Britain. We've got great in front of our name because we can do great things. And
exactly.
We've absolutely and utterly lost that. I agree with you.
Very sad, very sad. I mean, the skills are all there, and there are lots and lots of people who want to do these sort of things. But unfortunately, there's the establishment. The establishment gets in the way. The money isn't found. Life is very difficult, and but we fight on. We always keep fighting on.
Yeah. Well, you can see that the skills are here. Almost every Formula One team, which is the highest pursuit of automotive technology, wants to base their teams in England because we have the best engineers and the best facilities in the world to make these cars go as fast as they can. And not only that, most of the American sprint cars, whether it's the Champ Series or whatever, the Indy Series, most of those cars are manufactured also in the UK. So, we still do amazing things. But unfortunately, I think we live in a world now where we're almost shameful to put a Union Jack or a St. George's Cross on anything and shout about it. It's such a shame.
Well, I think this is something to do with the EU, isn't it? I mean, basically, once we joined the EU, then we had to sort of play our role in that. But now we're out. I mean, this is a great moment to get it all going again.
Exactly right. Exactly right. There's got to be some light at the end of the tunnel of kicking our European neighbours into touch. Yes, maybe we can. Maybe we can do it all over again. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Really don't see why not.
No, nor do I. So you were born in Scotland and
Yep.
educated and raised in Scotland, which is good. But you went to work in the aircraft industry.
Well, no, I started life. I started life selling paint and wallpaper.
Nice.
And then after that, man-made fibers, where I had a lucky job. And then after that, I ran expeditions across Africa and Asia. And then we got on with the Thrust 2 project.
Fantastic. I mean, what a life, eh? I love it. You're like, Lawrence of Arabia. I went to Africa and I did this expedition, and then I just built the world's fastest car. Oh, and I happened to drive it as well at that point. So I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm gonna play a little video. But the question I want to ask you, and it's probably the question that's been asked most in your life. Everyone's going to say, "What's it like to be behind the wheel of something doing 1,000 kilometers an hour?" What is that like?
It's a hell of an experience. I mean, it really is one hell of an experience, and it's not what you think it is. Because you're part of a team, and because you're part of a team, you must do exactly what you're asked to do, and you've got to deliver. Okay, and I've driven that car over 600 miles an hour 11 times, and after a bit, it gets it doesn't get exactly tedious, but it's very steady and very reliable. It's almost like driving a taxi in the morning. It's an extraordinary experience. But I'll take you through it. So imagine you're sitting in Thrust 2 there in the cockpit there. You've got the huge engine, which is just alongside your left-hand shoulder. Just got that started. It's winding up, and you can feel a bit of vibration there. So it's happy. And the oil pressure light goes out, so that's good. And then you wait for the aeroplane, and you've got the aeroplane flying up and down the Nevada desert. And they're just checking there's nobody else on the track, because otherwise this could be very unfortunate. And once you've got the clearance to go, you hold the car on the brakes with your left foot. Okay, yeah, these cars are all left foot braked, and then with your right foot you press down on the throttle. Open up the engine to 92% of maximum RPM. Okay, you mustn't go any faster than 92% at that point. It's still on its brakes. It's still holding there, which is shaking about quite a bit, but everything's right. The readings are okay. The temperature's all right. And then you go and you lift your foot off the brake pedal and put it onto the rest. You've got to have a rest there so that your foot doesn't stray onto the brake pedal. You then push the accelerator down right to the floor. So immediately you've got 35,000 horsepower, and you've lit the big flame at the back, the afterburner, and you're on your way. But it's very difficult between 0 and 300 miles an hour. The car's all over the place because we're running on desert, and also because we're using solid wheels. We haven't got any tires, so it's like a rally car. And so you've got to keep steering into the drift all the time, keep it straight, because you've only got to stay in a 50-foot wide lane. If you leave that, you get lost. So you won't have to give up. So you've got to stay in that lane. And when you get up to about 300 miles an hour, then the airflow on the fins begins to work, and the car straightens itself out. And the car's an absolutely brilliant product. It was designed by John Ackroyd. And I could drive that car to a lateral distance of about 1.5 inches at 650 miles an hour. So you then accelerate like hell from 300. You're heading up towards 500, and that speed range, 3 to 5, is boring. It's just more of the same, But once you start going really fast, in other words, you're approaching 600 miles an hour, you start seeing the shock waves appear on the wheel arches and also on the intake. And this is really something, And the interesting thing about it is, because I've been doing it for so long, my mental processes speed right up to a hell of a pace, and everything happens, Mike, in slow motion.
Yes.
It's all every single detail on the track as you go. You're into the measured mile. The car is absolutely flat out there. And then you're out the measured mile, and then that's when the fun starts, because you've got to think about stopping. So you come back very, very gently on the throttle, and that cancels the afterburner. So the big flame goes out of the back, but you've got an enormous amount of drag because the engine is slowing down now and it's building up drag at the intake. So you count to three, 1, 2, 3, and then basically at that point you fire the brake parachute. And the brake parachute comes out instantaneously. And on some of the fastest runs, we got nearly 6G deceleration.
Wow.
So losing speed at 130 miles an hour a second.
Wow.
Are violent. And this gives you a thing called the somatogravic illusion. And your basically your stability is provided by your ears. And with this violent deceleration, everything gets disturbed. And you think you're driving straight down to the middle of the world. It's extraordinary. The world tips. And but it's only for a second or so, and then you're down to a sort of leisurely 400 miles an hour. And at that about 400, you want to open the door and get out. It's getting really boring. Then down to 200, wheel brakes in at 200, very, very gently, so you don't burn everything out, and then bring it to a halt, and then write down everything you can possibly remember before the Jaguar cars alongside. So that's it. Yeah.
Wow! I just can't believe that. That was just. That's mind-blowing. That whole description is just mind-blowing. And what you said about everything slows down. I once interviewed the world's top fuel drag racing champion, Antron Brown. He's won it a few times. And his office is 3.7 seconds. That's him. He's done.
Right.
So he goes from the start line to the finishing line, 3.7 seconds. And I said to him, what happens in that 3.7 seconds? And he says, I send an email, worry about whether I put the bins out, think about whether what font to use on an invoice later. And he says it's kind of strange, that 3 seconds turns into him to an hour. The world slows down. So you must live life perpetually, Richard, at a high rate of speed. That's what you must have been.
Yeah, well, it was a great experience, a really great experience, and it was a great car. And the great thing about that car was it achieved its design speed. Yeah. And very, very few land speed record cars ever get anywhere near their design speed. But John Ackroyd's car did achieve that, and it was a great, great achievement. 650.88 was the peak.
Incredible speed, incredible. I remember as I'm the patron of, the chairman of patrons at the Coventry Transport Museum, proud to say the cars are actually in the museum. And I went in the simulator, the Frost simulator. And I remember shortly after, I think you were there. It's actually at Goodwood Festival at Speed. And I bumped into Andy Green, and I said to him on the simulator, when you're on full speed, he was actually on opposite lock. I said, you're on full speed, but you're actually sort of, for a moment there, you're on opposite lock. And he says, he said, that's just to keep the thing in a straight line, at over 600 miles an hour. You've got opposite lock on. So the world's fastest drift is what you've got.
It's an incredible story. I mean, it's a story of enormous bravery by Andy because the car was extremely difficult to drive. The only way we could make it work was to have rear wheel steering. So that meant we could minimize the cross-sectional area across the front of the car, and that would help us with the supersonic drag. Because if we'd had conventional steering on the front wheels, we'd have had to put blisters on either side of the car, and that would have increased the cross-sectional area, and we'd got a lot of drag, so it wouldn't work. So from Andy's point of view, it was an absolute nightmare to drive. I've never driven it, but Andy did. And what it was is really interesting is that, Mike, when you're driving and you want to turn left, okay, with an ordinary car, you turn left, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. With this car, you don't. What happens is you turn left and the back of the car comes out to the right and then you go left. So there's a drag. There's a drag in the time. There's a pause in the time. And Andy realized what you've got to do is to actually apply the steering at a certain frequency. Otherwise, it would get out of control. So he taught himself how to do that. And then when we started going really fast, then we got a problem, which we didn't expect, because we always expected that we had a subsonic airflow behind the shock waves underneath the car. And that wasn't the case. What happened was we got a supersonic shock wave generating around the wheels. And so what happened is it gradually began to pull Andy in the tail to the left. So Andy put in opposite lock to the right. The wheels were one behind the other, almost one behind the other. And so the slot between the two wheels changed. And the car just gradually drifted back again. So there was Andy happily putting in full lock, knowing that this car was very stable and very benign. It was an awful car to drive up to that point, but once it got supersonic, it seems that it was really quite a pussycat, which is great.
Fantastic. I've seen some YouTube videos where these rice boys in their souped up Japanese cars claim that they got the world's fastest drift. And no.
Mach 1.02, yeah.
Yeah, you want to be drifting at over 650 miles an hour, and then you can claim that you've got the world's fastest drift.
Absolutely. We've got to put them in their place. Quite right.
See, for you drove over 1,000 kilometers an hour. That was the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. That accomplishment won you the 1983 Seagrave Trophy.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that.
And if that wasn't enough, this is the bit that gets me with you, because I've sort of followed you my whole life, because you're a national hero and a national treasure. Is the fact that you've got the record. There you are, got the record, and it's fine, and you got the trophy, and it's time to pack up the stuff and go home. But already you're going, I'll tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to build a faster car, and I'm going to build a faster car for somebody else to drive to beat my record.
Well, we got a few other things first. I mean, we did airplanes first, and there was a ship. But then what happened was the Americans started to appear on the scene, and this was Craig Breedlove. And Craig just said, well, I bought my engines, and I'm going to be the first to break the sound barrier. I was the first, he said, over 400, 500, and 600, and I'm going to get 700. So I came back to Britain, and I thought, well, come on, we've got to take him on, for Christ's sake. We can't have this. And this was fascinating. And, the whole thing was sort of burning away. But the important thing of all, most important element of this was this guy, Ron Ayres. And Ron had been the missile designer at Bristol Aircraft Company. He was the chief aerodynamicist. He was semi-retired and bored out of his mind. And in point of fact, he was a guide at Brooklands at that point. And so by sheer good fortune, we met up, and he decided he would work with us and help us do this. And the whole project was really dependent entirely on Ron. All we've got to do is keep the money coming in and keep the team focused on the job. And the way we went, it was absolutely brilliant team. I mean, it's an enormous privilege to work with these guys. And of course, we were always let down by Britain, because Britain's hopeless. But the classic thing of all was trying to get, we'd had a good friend in the late King Hussein, and he was terrific. He was a great friend, and he gave us a desert to run on in Jordan, and he gave us all the fuel for the airplane so we could get the team out and back, etc. And then we got to go to America. And of course, the whole project sort of began to collapse at that point, because all the sponsors or would-be sponsors were sucking their thumbs and saying, well, I don't know that this can be done, and it's dangerous, and what happens if the car crashes and our piece of logo is the last bit that everybody sees, and all this sort of stuff. Quite oblivious to the fact you've got a team of people there who are absolutely committed to seeing this thing through and understood it. And the way we work these projects is that anybody can leave the team at any time they like. There's no coercion in it at all. So it's driven entirely by everybody's personal objectives. And, basically the money just wasn't coming. We weren't going to go. So what was actually happening was we were at Farnborough, working at our base at Farnborough. And on the way in through the door into our building, basically on the notice board there, we put up the percentage of budget we got. Because people kept on asking the question, how much budget have we got? Are we going to make it? And so I got fed up with this. So we put up the percentage. And I think it was during the first week of August, we had about, as either 11 or 14% of budget. And everybody just looked at each other and said, we're not going to do this. And I said, yes, we bloody are. We're going to get there somehow. But and they thought about it. And then they said, fine, Richard, regardless of what's going on, and we know you're doing your best, we're just going to keep working, whether there's money or not. We're going to keep working, and we're going to get there. Because if they'd stopped at that point, we would have been totally and utterly lost. But no, they kept going. And then, surprise, surprise, Jeremy Davy came up with this brilliant idea to generate the world's first ever crowdfunding operation, which he set up, and money from all over the world came in. It was just extraordinary. We needed 1 million liters of jet fuel, and Jeremy's system just delivered it. It came from all over the world. People have been following it in enormous numbers in about 150 countries. And when we were in trouble, they added up. It was just brilliant. So we got there.
The power, and this is the bit that I think people are missing. It's the power of people. I remember you did a run in 2017. Tell me if I'm right here. And you just did a taxi run, and I think like 10,000 people turned up and paid to watch you do this taxi run. That's how infused people were to be behind this project.
This was it. This was Bloodhound. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So what had actually happened is the government had ruined the project by defaulting on a grant offer, which was very sad. And our Chinese sponsors were basically left on their own, and they didn't feel very comfortable with that. So there was no more money from them. And we were determined that we were going to run the car come hell or high water. And the only time we could actually get the whole act together was in October. And we were at Newquay Airfield in October. Of course, in October, the weather's lousy and everything else, but we did get 3 good days. And so we said, come and see it. And the team put together this enormous show. I mean, when I turned up there, I thought, oh my God, we've ever done this. I mean, this looks like the Farnborough Air Show. It's absolutely massive. But they were absolutely right. And people turned up in huge numbers. And not only that, the Cornwall roads were jammed. When I finally got in there, and then the shop was absolutely jammed solid with people buying stuff. It was absolutely amazing. We had 10,000 people in 2 days, and they each paid 60 quid, which was fantastic. But the most important day was the third day, which was the education day. So if you can imagine, the first day had been the media day, the second day had been the public day, and the third day was the education day. So we put an awful lot of effort in the first 2 days, but we really didn't know what to expect on the education day. Anyhow, what happened is 3,000 school kids turned up.
Amazing.
And I was absolutely terrified by all this. I mean, this is just absolutely extraordinary. And the car was standing there on display. And as usual, the engineering team was standing around and all talking to each other, etc. And I was bloody angry. And I went up and said, listen, guys, we're here to educate Britain. This is what we're here to do. And you're just talking to each other. For Christ's sake, talk to the kids. And I went away again, and I came back, I don't know, 20 minutes later or so, and there were hoots of laughter. And suddenly the engineers were engaging with the kids. And this really hadn't happened properly before, because the engineers were all looking, they saw Formula One as their model, which was a big mistake. And in Formula One, the Formula One doesn't engage with the education at all. So, this was, they didn't think it was their duty to do that. However, they did it, and it was terrific. It really went. And then Andy did a couple of 200-mile-an-hour runs. And this was fascinating because the kids were absolutely wild. And I then realized what was happening, Mike. What was actually happening was these kids today basically live off screens.
Yeah.
Everything on the screen is, is basically is flawed or fraudulent or whatever. Everything's adjusted with CGI and everything else. So here were the kids with reality, and they went wild.
Yep.
And I suddenly realized, my God, we have a very, very powerful machine here in terms of education.
Well, a lot of people won't understand that about you, Richard, and you and Andy, actually, because you drove this. And I've looked into it. And at the time, I was thinking, because I've always been one for, why don't we teach basic mechanics at school? Why don't we teach life lessons at school? How to change a wheel on a car, how to change a spark plug,
absolutely,
how to change your air filter,
change a plug, yeah,
exactly. It never at school. And you and Andy together, you went to the government and you started an education program called STEM, the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics program for students. It was such a success. You had over 120,000 students and school children engaged for well over a year with your presentations from overseas, all over the world. And there you are with a Union Jack on your shoulder all the time, flying the flag for Britain. And
Absolutely.
and then of all things, and this is the bit that, you know, the juicy bit that I want to get to, the government not only let you down once because they pulled out that funding, they went and did it all over again. They made you another promise and then they dumped you again. Just what's going on?
Well, there's a fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is education in this country is run by the government, okay? And this is a hierarchical organization. And the problem with a hierarchical organization is they can't innovate at all. They don't understand innovation. They've come up the hierarchy, up the pyramid. They've never innovated in their lives. And suddenly, when they're faced with it, they just don't know what to do. And our fundamental problem was that we were having real money problems. And so we decided to take Bloodhound and put it on its wheels for the first time and show it in the city, in the Winter Gardens in the city. We could only afford a couple of days there, but 8,000 people came there to see it. People were just absolutely mesmerized by it. But no sponsors appeared. Nobody appeared on the scene saying, hey, we want to be a part of this. We can see the value in this. We want to be a part of it. Nothing. So I got a hell of a problem. So I went to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, and said, look, George, you've been down. Your kids actually brought you down to Bristol to see the car. You know what it's all about. We're in dead trouble. We're going to lose it. We can't support the cash flow. We're going to lose it. So we've got to do something. Are you up for it? To which he said, yes, he was. And he set up an enormous program to evaluate the value to Britain of the entire project. And it was a great privilege to take part in this because they really worked away. It went on for about 5 months in enormous depth and looking at every single aspect of it. And in the meantime, we'd signed the contract with Geely. And so this is the biggest contract we'd ever done. It was a fantastic situation. And I love the Chinese. They were just such fun to work with. It was great. Anyhow, then what happened was we got an offer from the Transport Minister, Joe Johnson, saying, here you are, guys. If you can satisfy our conditions, we'll give you 4.5 million. And I thought, this is what it's about. We've been through all the system. They've looked at every single aspect of it, all the cash flow, all the details, everything. They've been right the way through it, and they're happy with it. And so this is our letter of approval, I guess, really. And so when I looked at the conditions with all the others, the team, I just burst into laughter because we were so far ahead of them. We got all this done. We met all the conditions. And in the letter, there was an extraordinary thing which said that we're only going to give you, I can't remember what it was. It was something like 6 weeks in which to meet the conditions. So they were really setting us up big time.
Yeah.
And we'd done it. So so I called a meeting then with the government officials in London. We turned up there. We turned up as a team, with the financial people and everybody else. Yeah. And we went through and we handed all the contracts and documentation over to them. And Mike, it was an extraordinary meeting. I've never experienced anything like this. If you've got a situation where one organization sets up another organization and makes them an offer, but they've got to perform to deliver, when both sides achieve it, there is huge happiness. Everybody's, bloody hell, you've done it. Oh, isn't that fantastic? I'm so glad. Yeah, let's get the thing finished. And none of that. Absolute misery. And we left that meeting and we stood around outside and we said, what the hell happened there? And one of the team members said, well, Richard, they just don't want to do it. And so then there were no further meetings, and it was an absolute bloody nightmare. So it was quite clear they weren't going to do anything. They weren't even going to communicate. It was terrible, unprofessional arrogance.
Richard, I'm angry. I'm getting angry.
So am I can tell you. I lost a lot of my savings.
I'm angry for 2 reasons. Number one is you can clearly see they set you up. They give you 6 weeks to turn around all the information and make sure that you can present in 6 weeks, of which you did. And then obviously they wanted you to fail. They thought they're never going to do it in 6 weeks, so they're going to fail. You did. But the bit that's made me angry with this is the elephant in the room. They spent 5 months preparing for this. So they would have spent millions and millions and millions in whatever quangos to find out how not to spend millions with a great British innovation. That's what they've done.
Yep, that's exactly right. So I then had to go to China. And Mark Chapman and I went to China and we apologized to the Chinese and we said, look, I'm very sorry, guys. The British government has let us down. It's defaulted. And they sort of said, well, we understand. And obviously they'd had the same sort of problems with our government. But they were very good about it. And I had a letter from Li Shufu, the chairman, just saying, look, Richard, we know this is not your fault. But of course, the problem was that they were going to lose their great publicity run with the car in 2017, and they'd lost their first stage of their money too. But they were very friendly and very good about it, and I was very, very impressed.
Oh, I'm just sort of sitting here going.
Well, this is the problem, Mike. This is the country we belong to. It's not very good. It's not very bright. It's not very clever. There is something fundamentally wrong. And you can see it too with COVID. I mean, I was just hitting the table at home saying, God, you've got to make the move now. You've got to get people locked down now. You've got to do this now. And we drag on and arguments here and there and so on. We're just not very good. No. Now, of course, we've got a hell of a problem because basically, I don't know what state the financial thing of the status of the country is, but we'll have lost about 300 billion sterling. That's got to be recouped somehow, and we need these new companies as fast as we can. We don't need the old companies anymore. The huge shells. I mean, Shell's posted an enormous loss just now, actually massive loss. We don't need these people. We need these small companies, the small entrepreneurs, the guys who've got the thing. Because the wonderful thing about the internet is we can grow these things very, very quickly. It's surprising what you can actually do once you understand it. And Jeremy Davy opened the door for us with the funding for Thrust SSC all those years ago. Yeah. You can do things. You can really do things. The world will join you.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, and it again, it takes the private individual to step forward and say, no, we can do something here. Hold on a minute. The government don't want to get behind this. Nobody wants to get behind this. But there is a sense of Britishness that needs to be carried on with this, and in steps Mr. Warhurst, and it must
absolutely.
It must have been absolutely fantastic for you when this guy comes along, which at the time it seems like he's got a lovely pot of money that he's looking to play with, and he comes along and he really gets behind the project.
Yeah. Well, what happened was that basically what happened was that gradually the company I better rewind a bit. We had a meeting eventually with the Secretary of State, and he was very apologetic for what had happened, and he really was. And he reinstituted the grant, but he said to us that we got to raise even more money to satisfy him, and then he would pay us. And of course, the problem was we were in the middle of Brexit, and there was no money anywhere for anything. So that was it. The company was running out of money, and the sensible thing to do was to put it into administration. Because if you go on running an insolvent company, then basically the whole thing turns into an enormous mess. If we were to go into administration, then basically the team, the car and all its parts would stay together as one package, and we find somebody new. So we signed up with the administrators. The administrators were absolutely hopeless, and they promised this, promised that, failed left, right, and centre. And then suddenly, Andy Green and I got this letter from Ian Warhurst, saying, I'm really interested. I've just sold my company. I've been retired for about 3 days, and it's time to do something. And so we put Ian in touch then with the administrators. They signed him off within the week, and there he was. Ian then decided what he was going to do was he was going to run the whole thing himself, which is absolutely ideal. And he would, because of course he got the combination of the money and also the business experience, which is really good. And he decided he didn't want the old senior management, which included me. And that was the right decision. I was exhausted. I mean, Mike, I was so physically exhausted that it took me about 3 months to actually recover. So what he did was absolutely right. So then he put his money in, and they ran the car, and they got up to 628, which was great. It was a good start. But of course, with a project like this, you've got to keep going. If the project stops at any time, then people just say it's over, isn't it? I mean, Yeah. But as long as people are grafting away and the thing's still moving, then people will support it and they will fight it. And anyhow, things went from sort of bad to worse, and eventually Ian was forced to give up and put it up for sale, which is what he's just done. And I put out this statement, not authorized by anybody, not by the team, not by Ian, but just a statement of my own thoughts, just saying, look, we've bloody well got to get this thing finished. I'm doing other things at the moment. I'm not interested in going back to Bloodhound. But the thing is that the money needs to be found, and this project needs to be finished. We spent 31 million quid on it, and I suspect Ian has spent probably 2 or 3 himself. So, it's all been done. It's all there. It's just got to be finished. And we wait to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, what is next? I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what's next. The whole nation are going to cross their fingers because I'm going to win the Euro Millions. And when I win the Euro Millions, it's going to be the Brewer Bloodhounds Noble project. And we're going to bloody do it, Richard. That's why.
There you go. Absolutely, Mike. That's exactly what's needed.
It'd be so nice to do it with Euro money as well, being the Euro Millions,
having just left the European Union. Yes, taking the money with us. Quite right. Yes.
The irony of it. The irony. Yeah. And I will only ever pay people if I can do it in euros. Just for the fun of it, Richard. Well, that's what's got to happen. And so, look, Richard's done this open statement, which I think is absolutely right and on point. And from my point, the audience out there, anyone who's watching, listening to this, if you know somebody that can get involved, can help in any way, whether it's a dotty uncle that's invented the wheel, whatever it is, if you know somebody, just get involved. Let's make Britain great again, and let's do it by making this car do what it set out to do, and educate hundreds of thousands of students and kids across the United Kingdom at the same time, and put us back on the top.
Yep, exactly. We can do that. We just need the money.
We just need the money. That's all we want. Give us the money.
There we go.
Give us the money. So
and Mike, there is somebody out there. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's saying, just like Ian, saying, "Come on, let's get this thing going."
Yeah, of course there is.
And what it actually needs is an underwrite.
Yeah.
Now the government has said, and Ian didn't draw down the money, so the government has said, "We will give you 4 million." That's what the Secretary of State. And I have the letter. We'll give you 4 million, but you've got to show you've also raised so much. And so Ian has said he needs about 8 million to get to the next record. Well, basically, he could jolly well draw down that other money so that it is 4 million. And there are people out there who could just sneeze and do it.
Yeah, exactly. Lottery funding.
There you go.
So tell us before, you've got this book out, which I'm waiting for my signed copy.
Oh, yeah, Mike. Here we go. Yes, absolutely.
Put it up on screen.
Have you not got? Oh, I'll get you one. Yeah.
I need a signed copy from you. That'd be amazing. So Take Risk. It's the most appropriate title for you. It could be anything else other than Take Risk. I thought, it might have been called Flat Out because, metaphorically, you've gone flat out, and now in your time of life, as you said, you're exhausted, you're flat out. But Take Risk is the perfect title. Tell us about the book, Richard.
Well, what happened was that we have, with these projects, they're very, very sophisticated projects. They're not about a project where, money goes in one end and a whole lot of people spend it and it goes on. They're very, very sophisticated. We operate companies which are flat companies. It gets people operating at fantastic levels of our not only inspiration, but motivation. And they start to realize who they actually are. Now, this is amazing. I used to teach management years ago, and I learned an awful lot about this. And the fascinating thing is that most people go through their lives without discovering who they are. Mike, you're an exception. You're an exception. I mean, you've got an enormous success with wheeler dealers and all the rest. I mean, you know who you are. But most people in these large organizations never get that chance. They never get the chance to do something themselves. And to be able to claim, I did that. This is what I'm capable of doing. This is who I am. And this is how we run these projects. And of course, they've been enormously successful and incredible that we broke the sound barrier on a total cash spend of 2.5 million. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
But when you've got a lot of people all working very, very focused, all with the organization well organized and running smoothly, that's what happens. It's absolutely astonishing. So now you see what happens is that I'm at the front of all this, Mike, and I'm going to meeting all these various boards and proposing that they join the company. And I'm join the project, and I'm putting deals ahead for them, which are being very carefully worked out. And these people could never, ever accept them. Why? Well, because they've never innovated in their lives.
Yeah.
They politic their way up to the top of the organization, and suddenly they're being asked to innovate. And oh my God, we've never innovated. We haven't a clue how to innovate. Whereas with our projects, what we're doing is we're innovating all the time. Everything we're doing is innovation. So it's innovated on top of innovation. It's compound innovation. And, there was a classic example of that with Thrust SSC, where suddenly we had a real problem because we had a Mach meter in the cockpit and nobody knew how to work this thing. So the Mach meter is like a speedo, and it's got two pipes coming out the back. One goes to the sort of needle nose on the needle on the front of the car, known as the boom, and the other is a reference one, which goes on a side of an aeroplane somewhere where the airflow is reasonably predictable. And that's called the static port, okay? And the fundamental problem was, there we are, we've got the instrument, we've got the needle nose on the front, and then the boom on the front. Where the hell's the static port going to go? And we couldn't answer this. So I went to the Farnborough Air Show, and I went around and I chatted up all sorts of people, and I found an American organization that specialized in this. And I said to them, look, would you be interested in helping us? Because we've got to solve this. And they said, yes, of course we would. So we had a meeting, and they said, we would really love to do this. We'll take all your CFD data, we'll work on it, and basically what we'll do is we'll come up with an answer for you. It'll take us about 3 months to do, and basically we're talking about round about, I can't remember the thing now, $300,000 or something it was. $160,000, that's right. That's a discounted rate. Okay, $160,000. Are you on? And I said, no, of course we're not on. I mean, we got to do this far quicker than you. We certainly haven't got $160,000 to spend. And so we kind of shook hands and said, well, okay, that's it. It's not going to work. So I went back to the design team and said, guys, look, I'm terribly sorry. I failed. We really looked as if we were going to get there. And then, and I said to them, look, it's back with you. You've got to solve this thing. And what I didn't realize was that they'd solved it by lunchtime. They'd solved it by using a vacuum flask and a small tap. So when Andy got in the cockpit, he would open the tap, the local ambient pressure would then flood into the vacuum container. He would then shut the tap and trap it there, and that was the reference pressure. And they then did all the complex mathematics which went with it, and it cost us $50. Now that's innovation.
It's brilliant.
But you can only do that, Mike, if you've got the right organization.
Of course.
If people are primed and understood, and you have the right culture. You have the ordinary culture. They say, oh, we can't do that. We haven't got any money, and it stops.
No, of course. That's just bloody brilliant, isn't it? I love it. And there you go. I bet that was done over lunchtime, all sitting around, drinking a cup of tea, talking about it, and going,
there you go.
An idea. Why don't we just
That's how we do it.
And that is best of British engineering right there.
But the important thing to understand about this, Mike, is that the organization is set up in such a way that they could implement this. They didn't have to come to me, the director, and say, Richard, will you approve this? Because I would send it straight back to them and say, guys, you've got the responsibility. You've got the responsibility and the authority. If you want to do this, you do it, and just make sure it works.
Yeah. They just got on and did it.
And they just got on and did it. Yeah. It's a wonderful organization. Yeah.
Fantastic. So the book is now available on sale.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going really rather well. I'm really pleased with it, actually.
Where can they buy it? Where can we buy it?
You can get it on Amazon, get it online. It's all the good bookshops. It's a really fascinating thing to do because I've been very rude about all sorts of people and things. And, I think it's important to tell the truth and tell people what this is about. And what this is a different sort of book. It's about actually a book thanking the amazing people who supported us. So I'm not praising the teams here anywhere. I'm talking about basically how we've done these various projects. There are about 11 projects in it, one way or another, and the amazing people who backed us, who came forward and said, "Yeah, we're going to support you," and made it all possible.
That's fantastic.
So it's rather fun, and I hope people will take it seriously, because we've got to change Britain big time. We can't go on doing the same old things anymore. We really can't, and the civil service have got to change big time. There's a big problem there.
Richard, I'll tell you, there is the fourth plinth at Trafalgar Square is always empty, and if there isn't a statue of you up there one day, well, this country will sink in.
Mike, we'll go up there together. How's that?
This country will sink into the sea. You've done so much for Great Britain. You really have. You've really put us on the map. You've shone a light on British engineering globally. You've been an inspiration to so many people that just want to achieve something or just have fun and go fast. And for that, Britain thanks you, Richard. It's such a pleasure to sit here and be able to do this with you this afternoon. I really appreciate your time.
Mike, if you ever want to do this again, it'll be great fun. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for all your research and your humor and everything else. It's been really good.
We'll be doing it again next week. It's a weekly.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, plenty of time. Yeah.
It's a Mike and Richard show. So, Richard, if people want to get in touch with you, or people want to find out about you, do you have anything out there on social media? Or
yeah, I'm not very good on social media, but basically, I'm up there on Twitter and also up there on Facebook, so they can plug in there, and basically just make contact, send me some questions, and I get this stuff all the time, and it's a real honor and great fun.
Fantastic. Richard Noble, thank you from the bottom of my heart and the British public's heart for taking the time to do this. You've been my favourite guest. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so very much.
Right, now that was good.
There you are. It's in the can. Yeah.
In his glory, wiping his nose, isn't he amazing? There you go. Thank you very much to Richard Noble, OBE. As I say, why isn't Sir Richard Noble? I don't know. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope to be able to bring more amazing guests like that to you very, very soon. So keep checking in with me on MikeBrewerMotoring.com. That one's going to be shared all over the world, and I can't wait for people's responses to it, because he's a true inspiration. In the meantime, look after each other. Stay safe, everyone. Stay 6 feet apart. Look after our NHS, and I'll see you all soon. I'm now going to play you out with a little bit of music.